Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Draft Geek podcast. I'm Brian Johannes. On this week's episode, we're going to provide you a 2019 NFL Combine preview. The Combine starts this Wednesday and it goes all the way until next week, Monday. Lots of different activities. We're going to see hundreds of NFL draft prospects come in and get measured, get weighed, get tested on the field, and then go through drills. Not to mention different meetings and such. It's probably one of the most popularized NFL pre-draft NFL events. I know I prefer the Senior Bowl a little bit better, but the NFL Combine does give you a look at the underclassmen also. Before we get started, a couple things about the Combine, at least as the way I look at it and the way I believe NFL teams look at it. It's not like, oh, this player has a great showing at the Combine. Blah, 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 runs a 4.3 40. Boom, they're a first-round pick. They're a second-round pick. We tend to hear that a lot. A guy has a good Combine. They're like, oh, they're a first-round pick now. I think a lot of when that happens, it's because we're finding out from the teams. That information is leaking out. Player X has a great Combine, and he wasn't talked about as a first-round pick, but now he is. And the NFL team's probably like, hey, this is a guy we're thinking about in the first round. He has a good, and that just solidifies it, and then that leaks out to the media. So I think if you hear people say, oh, this guy made himself a first-round pick, maybe it's because that reporter, that insider is heard from teams that person might be a first-round pick, and that's something they've thought all along. That's just kind of my thought process. I think a lot of times, I know when I look at the Combine and say player X has a great showing, that's going to make me go back and look at the film and say, okay, what am I miss? Maybe it's I haven't watched him yet, so now I'm going to make sure I go watch him for sure. Maybe it solidifies things. Maybe a guy that's like, okay, I think he plays fast. Yep, he ran a 4.3 40. He's fast. Hey, maybe I'm like, hey, I have concerns about this guy's speed. Oh, he didn't run very good. Or maybe he did run good. I'm like, okay, let's go back to the film and watch. So the basis of this podcast, what I'm going to do is just going to go day by day to share what's going on that day and then kind of what I'm looking for. And let's start with day one, this Wednesday, February 27th. The significant thing that's going on there is the offensive linemen and the running backs are getting measured. So you're going to have your heights, weights, arm length, hand size, all that fun stuff. To be honest, I think the biggest thing that I'm looking for here is Jonah Williams. Jonah Williams is my top-rated offensive lineman in this class. There's a big concern whether he can play tackle or he has to be moved inside the guard. I like his footwork. I think he could play on the outside. But the big concern with him is his arm length. He's reported, and sometimes you see it on tape, that it looks like he has shorter arms, and that could be an issue facing off against the talented defensive ends, outside linebackers who are rushing, who can utilize different pass rushing moves to negate those long arms. And you sometimes want those long arms in case you get beat. You can push those guys past the pocket. I think the magic number is 33 inches. If Jonah Williams has over 33-inch arms, I think that's a good sign. You would love to have around 34-inch, but I think if he's over 33, that's a good sign. I mean, guys have had success at tackle with shorter arms. Joe Thomas is famous for having, shorter arms, and Joe Thomas is surefire Hall of Famer. So just because a guy, doesn't have the longest of arms at tackle doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a complete, bust and can't play the position. All right, that's kind of the basis for day one. You'll see a lot of different interviews too, a lot of general managers, some new head coaches. We'll also be, meeting with the media. Day two is where we start to kind of get a little bit more into it. We're going to see the running backs and offensive linemen. They'll do their bench press. When I look at the offensive line, I just don't want to see low numbers in the bench press. That just shows me maybe that you don't have good functional strength. Maybe you're not putting in the time in the weight room. But like I said, it's not an end-all be-all just because a guy doesn't put up, there's certain guys who have super long arms. It's a lot tougher to bench press 225 pounds multiple times compared to someone with shorter arms. So you got to kind of take that stuff with a grain of salt. I think if you see an outlier number, it kind of might mean something, like really low or really high. If it's somewhere in the middle, not a big deal. Another significant thing about day 2 is we get to see the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends get measured. And of course, everybody's attention is going to be on Kyler Murray. His height and weight on Oklahoma's website, he's listed at 5'10", 190 pounds. We all know that colleges don't always put the most accurate heights and weights. I think he's probably going to be 5'9" and change, and I think he's going to be close to 200 pounds. I think if Kyler Murray comes in at 5'10" and over 200 pounds, that's best case scenario for him. But in all reality, it's not that big of a deal. If he can play at over 200 pounds during the season and still have his explosiveness and still function like he did in college, I think he'll be fine. If he comes in at 185 pounds, I think that's going to maybe cause some teams to kind of rethink it, or even possibly just pass on him. All right, there's not much else there. Running backs, or wide receivers, I think just seeing some of the guys' heights will be interesting on that. But I don't think there's anybody that's too out there of, we have to watch that like it was with Kyler Murray. All right, let's get into day 3. This is this Friday. That's what I think everyone's, your first time that you're actually going to watch it. And that is because we actually get to see the on-field stuff. Running backs and offensive linemen are going to go through the 40-yard dash, the vertical leap, the 3-cone drill, all those timed drills. And then they're also going to get out there and do the drill work. So we're going to see running backs catching the ball. We're going to see them, carrying the ball over the bags. We're going to see the offensive linemen doing their kick steps and their mirror drill, so on and so forth. What I'm watching is I want to watch these second-tier running backs. Josh Jacobs, I think, is the clear number 1 running back in this class. Behind him, it's kind of muddied. You got David, different guys that could be the second wide running back taken. You got guys like David Montgomery, Devin Singletary from Florida Atlantic. I like Justice Hill out of Oklahoma State. Darrell Henderson from Memphis, Elijah Holyfield from Georgia, Dexter Williams from Notre Dame, Myles Gaskin from Washington. There's a lot of guys that are in this next tier that, I want to see how they do on the field. And that's one of the nice things about the Combine is you can see these guys all run the 40, all do the vertical leap, all get to see them do the 3-cone, the short shuttle. You get to see them do these drills, and you can kind of compare them. You're like, okay, here's Justice Hill and Darrell Henderson, both explosive open field runners. Let's see how they do. Back to back, relatively back to back. They're both H's. Holyfield's right in there too. So it's kind of cool to see that because you could say, okay, I have similar grades on all these guys. Which one stands out at the Combine? And I think that could help me. Like, okay, I was leading this guy. He did better at the Combine. I'm going to keep him ranked ahead of him. I think NFL teams kind of do this too. If they're, like, hey, we like these running backs. They're all bunched together. Hey, which one did better at the Combine? Which one did better at the interviews? So on and so forth. Also going on, like I said, offensive line. There's a few guys that I think are going to really impress here. Jawan Taylor, the offensive tackle from Florida. He's such an easy mover, both laterally and getting depth. He shows on tape that he can mirror. I think the position drills that he's going to do at the Combine are really going to highlight that. So I think I have him right around. I consistently have him mocked in the top 10. I think it's just going to solidify that. North Carolina State center Garrett Bradbury is another guy to kind of keep an eye on. He's an athletic interior offensive lineman, plays center for the Wolfpack. You watch him on tape, and he's such a good athlete. He can move, he can redirect. I think, once again, that's really going to come out here, solidify himself as probably the top true interior offensive lineman. I think he could push him to that first round. Uh, Jonah Williams, like I said before, he's my top-rated guy. I think he is a good athlete, and I think he's going to show that. There'll be questions on whether he can play offensive tackle, but I've always said since I've watched him, I think he could play tackle, but I think he'd be an all-pro guard, kind of like Zach Martin a couple years ago out of Notre Dame, who's now killing it with the Cowboys. Andre Dillard from Washington State, another athletic left tackle. This class seems to have a lot of really good right tackles, and there's not as many left tackles. You got Jonah Williams who's played the left side, Andre Dillard, Yanni Kajus, so on and so. Those are really about your true left tackles that are mentioned in that first, early second round. So I think Dillard, once again, if he's able to show, maybe if he could show some power, they do a couple drills where they lift up the sled and they show the punch. If he could show he's got good punch and he's got better power than maybe people think, I think that's only going to solidify him. I think he's a top 20 pick when it's all said and done. And then lastly, Chuma Doga from USC. He shined at the Senior Bowl with his footwork and his agility. He's smaller. He's only about 6'4". So I think once again, some teams will say, is he too short to play tackle in the NFL? We're going to have to move him inside the guard. So I think kind of showing some of this ability might, and maybe his length too, maybe, get some good more measurements on that. Just something I kind of keep an eye on. All right, the last thing that goes on Friday is the defensive line and linebacker measurables. So we get to see, not only the defensive tackles, but the defensive ends, the pass rushing outside linebackers, and then the true stacked linebackers. There's two guys that I'm really anxious to see how they measure. That's Ed Oliver and Brian Burns. Ed Oliver, tremendous defensive tackle. He came in as a true freshman for Houston and was just dynamic. He was mentioned in the Heisman. Sophomore year wasn't so great. This year he showed, he played well, but then he had injuries and a bunch of other stuff. So I think he's going to put on a show. But how he weighs in is going to be important. There's talk he could be 6 foot. He could be 6'1". I exchanged a few messages with Joe Moreno of the Draft Network, who watched, went and scouted him on site for a game. He thinks he's about 6'1". I think if Ed Oliver measures in at 6'2", it's amazing. I think that's best case scenario for him. I think if he's 6'1", it's not the end of the world. 6 foot, I think it's going to eliminate him from some teams, but he's probably going to be around 6'1", so something to kind of keep a watch on. Also, his weight. Lance Zierlein of NFL Network talked about how he'd heard from scouts or people that he was weighed 274 this year. That's kind of small for a defensive tackle. He gets a lot of Aaron Donald comparisons, but Donald was over 290. That's, do the math, about 25 pounds. So I'll be curious to see what he weighs. I think if he weighs closer to 290, I think that's, and he's able to still be explosive on the field. Once again, best case scenario, it's a win-win situation for him. But if he's closer to that 275 pounds, once again, that's going to raise some red flags with teams. Like I said, I also mentioned Brian Burns, the Florida State defensive end, tremendous speed rusher off the edge. He's got some of the best bend around the corner out of any prospect in this draft. I think he is but the concern with him, same thing kind of like with Randy Gregory a few years ago, is his weight. There's talk that he played in the 220s, that he's listed, in the 230s. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. I think if he weighs in the 240s, that's probably a good sign. He's probably going to have to be an outside linebacker in a 3-4, or maybe a weak side defensive end in like a Seattle-style defense. But, he's going to run into some questions about his bulk and if he's able to handle the edge on a play-in and play-out basis. So I think that weigh-in is important for him. All right, as we move into day 4, this is Saturday. This is where we have the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends taking the field for their drills. We also get to see the defensive backs get measured. So it's something to kind of keep an eye on. You always got to wonder when you go into these combines, who is going to be throwing. Are the top quarterbacks going to be throwing? Some years we get to see the top guys throw. Other years they sit out. So far, Dwayne Haskins is throwing. I have not seen one way or the other if Drew Lock, Kyler Murray, or Daniel Jones are. I would think they would be, but like I said, I couldn't find one way or the other. So I hope they all do. I don't think it really hurts anybody. Last year we saw Josh Allen throw, and I don't think that hurt or helped him based off of his tape. You just want to see, once again, as an evaluator, you want to see these guys go back to back. We saw Dwayne Haskins throw. What is Kyler Murray going to look like after him? What is, Drew Lock going to look like? And you can kind of, once again, I have Dwayne Haskins and Kyler Murray neck and neck for that top spot. Maybe if something happens and Haskins just looks so much better, maybe I keep him there. I mean, to be honest though, how they throw, it's not that big of a deal to me. Even though I just spent time talking about it. Receiver wise, DK Metcalf is definitely going to be a guy to watch. His medicals, I didn't mention that earlier, are going to be important. He had that neck issue, or he's supposedly cleared and ready to go. I have a feeling some teams are going to flunk him on his medical. I don't know. I just assume it's got a neck issue. Some teams will, but who knows? It's just a pretty serious thing. I'm really curious. He's the top-rated receiver by a lot of people. He's not mine. I have some reservations about him. I'm really concerned about his route running. So he'll get a chance to do that. And at Ole Miss, he ran a lot of go routes, some basics, go, slant, post, those simple things. And he showed the ability on tape to win downfield and make plays downfield. So what I'm looking for in the combine is they're going to have him run routes where he has to go in and out of breaks. And, you didn't get to see that on tape. So this is going to be helpful. I think, you wonder about his stiffness. I know some people are saying, his muscle, you saw that picture of him just huge and full of muscles. And that raised some people, including myself, about his stiffness. And others are like, hey, you know what? It's not a big deal. He's going to be fine, blah, blah, blah. Well, we actually get to see that. And if he's a guy that can go in and he runs those, double moves or those, hard cuts where he has to go in and out and he does them well, that's going to elevate him in my opinion because I couldn't see that on tape. And I'm going to be able to at least see it a little bit here. But if he struggles, a lot of my same questions that I have about him are going to persist. I'm anxious to see how he runs the 40-yard dash. I know there's a few prop bets out there that people are like, oh my gosh, you got to take him. He's going to run in the 4.3, the high 4.3s, low 4.4s. This would be curious. He's a large individual, 6 foot, 6'2", 6'3", about 200, probably 220, 225 pounds. I have him listed at 6'4", 225. So, if he's 6'4", 225 and runs a 4.3 40, that is pretty amazing for that size. But on tape, he shows explosive speed. I think he's going to do well in the vert and the broad, the vertical leap and the broad. Those are both explosive timing drills. I want to see him in the 3-cone. I want to see him in the short shuttle because I think those are going to tell me a lot about his route running ability and the ability to go in and out of breaks and explode and change direction. Kind of going along with that, we have a group of receivers kind of in that second tier. I like to call them the contested catchers. You got guys like N'Keal Harry, Kelvin Harmon, Hakeem Butler. I think you could probably throw J.J. Arcega-Whiteside in there also. These are all guys that thrived in college on contested catches. They didn't necessarily show a lot of wiggle in and out of breaks, so they were consistently making catches with defenders around them. So it'll be kind of curious to see how they also do. It's a lot of the same things I talked about with DK Metcalf, to see how these guys do, making double moves and going in and out of breaks. So that'll be curious to kind of watch. 40-yard dash, I think if any of these guys get under 4.6, it's, best case scenario. anything, if they're in the low 4.6s, it's not the end of the world. We're not expecting any of these guys to be burners, but, N'Keal Harry's my top rated guy. He's shown some ability to win and create separation running routes. So I think if he's able to run like a mid 4.5, I think that's awesome for him. Kelvin Harmon's another guy that's getting some first round consideration. Once again, he needs to run in the 4.5s to really solidify himself there. Whereas Hakeem Butler, I really want to watch him run those routes. A lot of the same questions I have about DK Metcalf, I have about Hakeem Butler. How is he, laterally changing directions? All right, we move on to the tight ends. It's a good group. We have three top guys, Fant and Hawkinson from Iowa, Irv Smith from Alabama, and they are all your top elite guys. But there's a lot of guys below them. Fant's a guy I think is going to really thrive at the combine. He's such a freak athlete at his size. I think he's going to put up huge numbers. And I think I've always had him as my number one wide tight end. I think you're going to see other people like, oh, whoa, he's first round pick now. And it's like he always has been. So, be anxious to see him. Hawkinson, I want to see some of these testing numbers. He shows, good acceleration and burst. I think he's a good athlete. I know I've compared TJ Hawkinson to OJ Howard. They're both good athletes. They're both really good inline blockers. I like both of their potential as a pass catcher and a route runner. It's just I felt like they were still needing development, and Howard took them kind of a year to do so, like most tight ends. I think Hawkinson's going to follow that. Irv Smith, I've compared to Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz out of Stanford now with the Eagles. A guy that can block in. Good blocker, good athlete. Kind of nuanced route runner. So I think that's something to kind of watch and just kind of see these guys go back to back. One tight end that I'm really anxious to see out there, he's not really getting talked about a ton, but I watched him on tape just because I went through and I watched every single tight end. I'm doing tight ends for the website, all the scouting reports and that. And I just watched this guy just because he was invited to the combine, and he really blew me away. And that was Kahale Waring from San Diego State. Here's a guy that's got good size. He's 6'6". He's 250. 6'6", 250 pounds. He wasn't used that much at San Diego State, but he, showed good burst and acceleration. He was able to high point the ball in the air, and you just see a lot of tools. And I really like him. I can't wait to watch him, see how he does there, see how he compares to the top guys. And I think he's definitely a sleeper tight end that maybe he's going to blow up the combine, and so we're going to start hearing a little bit more about him. Or, maybe if he just does what he's supposed to do, he's going to be a day 3 steal, in my opinion. The last thing on Saturday is the defensive back measurables. There's not really any huge thing to kind of watch. It'd be nice to see some heights and weights on some of these guys, but there's no one that's out there that I'm like, okay, it's not like there's a Kyler Murray or a Ed Oliver type of guy where you're like, okay, what's he going to weigh in at? What's he going to, how is his height going to be? I think some of these guys like a Joe Juan Williams out of Vanderbilt, he almost looks like a linebacker playing cornerback. So be kind of just curious to see what he weighs in at. But like I said, we got a lot of underclassmen at the defensive backs like we typically do. So just kind of nice to see the measurables and see what they all kind of come in at. All right, for the we're looking at day 5. This is Sunday. This is where we're going to see our defensive linemen and our linebackers hit the field, along with the we're done with the weigh-in aspect of the combine. I'm really anxious to see Ed Oliver. We see him on tape just show off this unbelievably athletic ability, his ability to change direction. We've seen clips, where him running wide receiver type drills, and he is just a freak of an athlete. So I'm curious to see how he's going to do. That 3-cone, I think he's going to put up defensive end, outside linebacker type numbers. And the magic number for that 3-cone is 7 seconds. And usually, like edge rushers, if they get under 7 seconds, they're considered elite. They tend to pan out pretty well. I think Ed Oliver is going to push to be under 7 seconds. I think he's just too freak of an athlete. He's too explosive. He can change direction so easily. I think he's going to kill that drill. Kingston Kiki, the defensive tackle, defensive end from Alabama or Texas A&M, I think he's going to do very well in that also. I can't wait to see those two, what their numbers are there. Rashawn Gary from Michigan, the defensive end, I think he's also going to put on a show. You watch his tape at 6'5", 270 pounds. He does a lot of stuff that you just don't see out of other defensive ends. And he didn't have the best production at Michigan, but I think his ability, his athletic ability, is going to shine. I think he's just going to move fluidly. He's going to put up high testing numbers, and that potential that he has, that a lot of these NFL teams look for, I think he's going to show here, and kind of solidify himself as a top 10 pick. Nick Bosa is interesting because we haven't really seen him much this year. He got hurt early on in the season and then kind of packed it in. I'll be kind of curious to see how he performs. He's the clear-cut number 1 or number 2 best player. It all kind of depends on where Quinnen Williams falls. But I'm curious to see once again how he holds up against some of these other pass rushers. Speaking of Quinnen Williams, he's another guy. I don't think he's going to have huge testing numbers. He's not going to come in here and be like set combine records. His best talent was on the film, on the field. And so as long as he doesn't bond the combine, I don't think it's really going to matter. He gets compared some to Ndamukong Suh, so it'll be really curious to see what his testing numbers are, comparing that to Suh's. Just kind of see where he's at there. A couple of the defensive ends that I'm really looking to see their bend are Josh Allen and Montez Sweat. Allen's a guy that seems to be a consensus top 5 pick. Sweat's a guy who played well at the Senior Bowl. He had close to 30 sacks in his 2 years at Mississippi State, and did well at Senior Bowl, so he's in that top 20 discussion. I'm really curious to see their agility. When I saw Allen, I saw he didn't always bend the edge as much as you would like on film. He kind of got rode past the pocket. I like him as a speed rusher. I have concerns about his agility. Same thing with Montez Sweat. They don't seem to be very bendy as they're rushing. So I really want to see their their different agility testing. That 3-cone, I think that's going to be really interesting to see. Can Josh Allen get under that 7-second time? I don't think he will. I think he'll push close to it. Montez Sweat, I don't think he's going to do I don't think he's going to do great in that. I think he'll do fine. Short shuttle too. The change of direction. Really kind of curious to see how they do in that. One guy who I do think is going to do really good in that 3-cone is Brian Burns. As I mentioned earlier, he's got some weight issues that we're looking to see what he tests or measures in at. I think he's going to put up an elite 3-cone drill. Like I said, 7 seconds is considered elite. I think he's going to push for combine record if I had to put a guess for a defensive end. A couple linebackers. This linebacker class has some talent, but it lacks the top multiple elite guys. I guess Devin White, Mack Wilson, and Devin Bush are guys that I would consider your top inside linebackers, stacked linebackers, whatever you want to call it. Devin White, I'm really curious to see what his numbers are going to be. He's a sideline-to-sideline player. I like him coming forward. So just kind of see that. And then Devin Bush is a guy I think he's going to continue to rise up draft boards, at least the analyst draft boards. So how is he going to do comparable to a Devin White? And if he can test in the top, out of all the linebackers, consistently top 5 in these drills, I think he's a first-round pick. And then Sutton Smith, a Northern Illinois pass rusher. He played defensive end, but he's not very big. Sutton Smith's only about, let's see here, 6'1", 240 pounds. So he's got decent bulk, but he's small. So it'll be curious to see how he does. He's gonna play the defensive end, and so he's gonna be doing linebacker drills. So I want to see how he moves in space, how he redirects. I think if he can show that he moves well as a linebacker, I think he's going to really, open a lot of eyes, especially with his pass rushing ability. He's was right in contention last 2 years for the most sacks in NCAA football. So he can get after the passer. He's an explosive guy. How can he do out in space and running around? All right, and then the last day is the defensive backs. We're going to see cornerbacks and safeties take the field. Couple things that I'm really looking to watch. DeAndre Baker is one of the top cornerbacks in this draft. He seems to be kind of that third guy. He's very good in the short area. He's very patient. He reacts well. I just want to see his long speed. So I'm going to look at the 40-yard dash. I know the 40-yard dash isn't the end-all, be-all for a lot of these positions, but cornerback is definitely one of them that I'm really looking out for, because they've got to be able to run faster than these receivers. A receiver, if he's a 4.5 guy, you need your cornerback to run 4.5. If he's a 4.3 guy, you need your cornerback to run a 4.3. So Baker, I think if he can put up a respectable or a good 40-yard dash time, that's going to answer a lot of questions in my book. Also, I mentioned this with the receivers, with a lot of those contested catchers. I'm anxious to kind of see, as I call it, a cluster buster. There's a big group of cornerbacks kind of in that late first, early second round range that I'm really trying to keep an eye on. Joejuan Williams from Vanderbilt, Rock Ya-Sin from Temple, Amani Oruwariye from Penn State, Julian Love from Notre Dame, Trayvon Mullen from Clemson. I know they all are different. Joejuan Williams, Trayvon Mullen are going to be your press guys. Rock Ya-Sin, I think, can be a press guy. He shows other ability too. But I want to see these guys one after another. And okay, here's how Williams looked. Okay, here's Rock Ya-Sin, right before him. How did those two compare in some of these drills? Okay, and I think that could tell us a lot. I have these guys grouped up about the same type of range. And so you're just looking for reasons why is this guy better than that? And I think the combine and these drills, these position drills and timing are really going to tell us a lot about that. Speaking of safeties, I really want to see Deontay Thompson, but he is not going to participate in the drills. He had surgery to repair his wrist, so he's not doing any of the drill work. So that leaves Nasir Adderley and Taylor Rapp. Adderley's from Delaware. Rapp is from Washington. Rapp's probably more of your true strong safety, whereas Adderley, I think, could play free or strong. I liked Adderley's range on tape, so I'm curious to see how he does in those drills. And just once again, compare him to the other guys at the position, just to kind of see how they do, because they're so closely marked. Most of all, that kind of wraps it up. But the last thing I really kind of want to look at is who's going to have the fastest 40 time. I mean, that's always fun to see. Is anyone going to challenge for the top, that 4.22 record? I think guys that could: Paris Campbell, a wide receiver out of Ohio State; Andy Isabella, a wide receiver out of UMass. He was a 100-meter champion. He beat Denzel Ward in high school in the 100 meters. Terry McLaurin from Ohio State's another guy that's really kind of come up lately with his play at the Senior Bowl. He has such easy, fast speed. You watch him on tape, and he could just get to top speed very, very fluidly. Mecole Hardman from Georgia is another guy just like that, just a burner. I think all of those guys are going to push in the low 4.3s. And secretly, keep an eye out for Kyler Murray. I think if, when he runs, he's going to push the low 4.3s in my opinion. So I'll be really curious to see if he has one of the fastest times in all of the combine this year. That's going to wrap it up. Those are a lot of what I'm going to see. I know one of the most important parts of the combine, none of us really get to see. It's the player interviews and what they think, having the chance to sit down with these players for 15 minutes, talk out a lot of stuff, guys that maybe are developing, guys that maybe had some issues in their past, kind of get that out and how they vibe with these teams. And I think a lot of that goes into effect when they draft these players, not necessarily on the field stuff as much. So we don't get to see that, but it'll be kind of curious to see. I always look out okay, which team's meeting with which player, and sometimes you can connect the dots that way. and maybe see what positions they're targeting. If they're interviewing a lot of tight ends, you're like, okay, this is a team that's going to be targeting a tight end, so on and so forth. So that's going to wrap it up for my 2019 Combine preview. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know if you're like me, you're going to be glued to the computer or the TV watching these prospects. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Remember, the best way to get these is to subscribe, iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. While you're there, rate and review. That's the best way to get this out. Make sure you follow me on social media at draft_Brian on Twitter and Instagram. Make sure you follow at NFL Draft Geek also. And just make sure you're hitting up NFLDraftGeek.com for all your draft needs. I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for listening. Till next time.